Hello, you amazing people. Welcome back to RXMemes. Today we are going to be jumping into the subreddit r/ProRevenge for some juicy and so satisfying revenge stories. If you like today's video, I would love for you to hit that like button and subscribe. Let's get right into it. Bank screws old lady, lawyer screws bank, old lady gets millions back. Posted by user/eCashShepherd. Posted this on Ask Reddit a while back, and somebody suggested I should cross-post here. Financial advisors employed by a pretty major bank stole all the money of a wealthy old lady who was dying of Alzheimer's, and she didn't know anything until her lights were cut off. My brother was a pretty small-time lawyer and got the call to represent her. Every other big attorney in the area had either passed on the case or tried and failed to get anywhere. And since banks always have mandatory arbitration clauses worked into their contracts, she couldn't sue or even do discovery. Like, it was obvious what had happened, and the only people with access to the account were clearly implicated, but A, it was hard to prove without any access to bank records, and B, under arbitration, it wouldn't matter anyway. They could be criminally prosecuted, but the bank wouldn't have to pay back the money. Did I mention the bank had, at this point, frozen the lady's access to her own accounts due to fraud, so she couldn't even get to her own bank statements. Anyway, my bro became pretty obsessed with avenging this woman. By the time he got the case, she barely even knew what her own situation was most of the time. But her son just wanted to make the bank bend over, and my brother was all in. He managed to find an incredibly obscure technicality that nullified the arbitration clause, and was able to force a major bank into the discovery process. That alone was a huge enough deal that the decision was written up in many legal newspapers across the country. After fighting and delaying discovery until the very last minute, the bank dumped 200 plus boxes of documents on my brother the Friday before the Monday discovery hearing. He had 72 hours to go through tens of thousands of pages of documents. He rented himself a hotel for the weekend so he'd have no disturbances, had a friend bring a dolly and hand truck the boxes to the hotel room, and got to work. In one of the boxes was an email between a bank VP and the bank's chief lawyer. I incorrectly described this as two VPs in my previous post, discussing how there would never be a discovery process, so there was no need to destroy documents, i.e. future evidence, and also saying that they weren't worried about the little old lady's lawsuit since the bank had frozen her accounts, so she wouldn't be able to pay her lawyer, and he was just a small-time country lawyer. Their words, who would surely quit once he wasn't being paid. It wasn't like he worked for some huge firm that could just pay his bills while he worked. They also discussed how the lady would likely die of Alzheimer's before her accounts would be unfrozen once the fraud was proven to be false. They had my bro all wrong, of course. He was working all day on paying cases and then staying up half the night working on this one, sometimes without getting paid for months. We did the math later. He made about $2.75 an hour for his work over a span of 7+ years. Anyway, these chuckleheads openly discussed several illegal acts in emails to each other, and then failed to destroy the paperwork providing they had actually undertaken those acts, which, legally, they could have destroyed at the time, but they were so arrogant they thought they didn't have to. When my brother entered that into evidence on Monday morning, they immediately motioned for a recess and offered to settle for, an undisclosed sum. He also won his client $10 million in a separate part of the lawsuit. One agent recently finished serving a long sentence in the same federal prison as Bernie Madoff. He also lost his home, the beach home he had bought with the old lady's money, had his financial broker license revoked, and his wife left him. However, his kid did get a private college education paid for in cash with the lady's money, and he bought $200,000 worth of wine that was never recovered. Sadly, the lady did in fact die before the case settled, so the money went to her son and to a large charitable trust that then elected my brother as the main trustee. So he gets to disperse the money he won in the settlement and see a lot of people benefit from his work. The funniest part of this revenge was that the apparent motive for the theft was not just that the agent wanted to be rich. He had accomplices, but he was the main mastermind. He specifically wanted to use the money to enhance his standing in the community. So actually he donated a lot of the stolen money to charities so that he could be invited to huge galas, get philanthropic awards, etc. Now he is broke, unemployed, divorced, and disgraced, while my brother is going to galas and getting philanthropic awards with the money this guy helped pay for with the sale of his houses, cars, etc. Pretty sweet. ETA. I feel obliged to spread the anti-arbitration gospel of my brother. If it weren't for a fluke technicality that led to the boilerplate arbitration clause being thrown out, there would have been no discovery and no justice for this lady. Under arbitration clauses, you're not allowed to sue a bank, brokerage, financial advisor, etc. And without a lawsuit, you can't do discovery. And financial agents cannot be forced to pay you back for money they steal, even if you can prove they stole it. In this case, discovery led to evidence of tax fraud on the part of one of the agents who stole the money and didn't report it as income. And the feds then gained a lot more access to the records. In conclusion, arbitration benefits the corporation 98% of the time, at the consumer's expense. Opt out whenever possible. Posting again with a throwaway account, nervous about sharing this one. Posted by user/butcher tattletale. I used to be a butcher meat cutter. I was trained at a small mom and pop shop on how to be an actual butcher, rather than just a meat cutter. I loved the career. Of course, if you intend on even getting close to a decent salary, you have to take your skills to a grocery store and work your way up the chain. Or start your own successful business. I got a job at a chain supermarket. I worked there for several years until I was offered the chance to run my own department. The hitch was they wouldn't bump my salary for the promotion, so I didn't complain. I moved on to another supermarket. This one was fancy and had a real good reputation for being a nice chain. At this point, I want to let you know that I intend to keep this somewhat anonymous. Most of the naming and shaming has already been done, and this is 5 years in the past. This new supermarket only had 5 stores in my area. I worked at 3 of them during the 3 years I was there. I didn't have any real issues with this place until I was offered a promotion. Something you may need to understand is that each store had a meat department. Each meat department had a handful of meat cutters, an assistant manager, and a manager. Above the department manager, you had the store management, but you also had a district meat supervisor. This guy's job was to go to each store every few weeks and see how things are going, and get with the department manager to work on sales and waste, stuff like that. Due to our particular district only having 5 markets, our supervisor was also the manager of one of these markets. Let's call it Store C. When I was hired on, I began working at Store A. I bought a new house a little outside of town and moved to Store B so that I would have a closer drive. I liked everyone I worked with at both stores. I even liked the district supervisor, who I'll call DS. He was extremely friendly and outgoing. DS got a promotion which required him to move to another state and become that area's full-time district supervisor. He took it, and his assistant manager at Market C got a promotion to become the manager of that market. I was offered a promotion to assistant, but I would have to transfer from Market B to Market C, so I did. Market C was a store that I had not been in yet, and my first week there was pretty strange. The new manager was on vacation, and I found out that this particular market would have 2 assistant managers, me and another guy who I'll call AM. Besides me and AM, there were 3 other meat cutters. My initial impressions of the place were that it was the dirtiest meat market I had been in. You could smell our seafood case when you walked in the front door. The coolers were covered in old blood, and they had out-of-date products stacked all over the place. Now, I'm not usually an asshole, so I decided to wait until the manager came back from vacation and see how things go from there, because I may be seeing the results of a messy transition, and it might not be representative of how the market is usually run. When the market manager came back, he asked me what I thought of the place. I told him that I honestly thought it looked dirty and that aside from the cases needing cleaning, some of the cutters were putting spoiled seafood in the cases and slimy tenderloins in the display cases. He seemed disappointed, but I wasn't sure if it was my opinion he didn't like or the state of things while he was away. He had warned me about the other assistant manager, AM, and told me that AM was a troublemaker, that the former manager, DS, had told MM that AM was out to get him. Now MM was looking for reasons to fire AM. Are you still following? LOL. I told him that I would keep that in mind. The manager closed with me a few days and wanted to show me his methods of closing down the market for the night, which I thought was weird because I had years of experience doing this. But I'm not going to turn down a helping hand. MM's method of cleaning the machinery was to use no soap, no sanitizer, just degreaser and water, which is disgusting. I was also shown his method for accounting for waste. This company had a really good management information system, which gave a manager all the tools they need in order to plan for sales and reduce waste. The only requirement was that you fed it the proper information. Proper procedure was to scan out waste at the end of the night. This way you can keep track of what wasn't selling, or what you may be producing too much of. MM, on the other hand, didn't scan out anything. He threw it away, and made up numbers to input manually into the system. It doesn't make sense, but then he was able to fudge the numbers on the monthly inventory to make them look acceptable. Why? Out of all this is one of the things I understood the least. It is so easy to do it properly. I do know one thing. He was taught this by our former district supervisor, DS. He told me as much. I felt I was in a real bad position. I didn't want to be the guy who just got here and stirred up shit left and right. And I had also just bought a house, and I had a 2-year-old at home with another one on the way. I felt like I might actually be able to change the culture of this market a bit and get people to start doing things the way they should be. Not just my way, but the way the law and the company require us to do the job. Months go by and I didn't make much headway. Weeks and weeks of the manager shitting on the other assistant or ignoring him completely in order to give me more responsibility. One day, AM blows up on me. So we have a talk that night and I ask him what was going on, and he said he felt our manager was cutting him out in favor of me. I told him that I had noticed that too, and asked him what was up between the two of them, and he tells me his story. He began working at the market about a year before me under DS. our current manager, was his co-assistant. AM's first week there was similar to mine. He saw how dirty the place was and also closed the market down with and realized that he wasn't using any soap or chemicals. He told me some other stuff, like seeing him misweighing roasts by stacking rolls of stickers on the scale along with the meat. So AM went and told the manager at the time, DS. He told me that after that, they had it out for him. Of course I had heard the other side of the story from and now it all made sense. My co-assistant saw many of the same problems I did and thought that DS would care. Instead, DS told to watch his back, and they tried poisoning most of the store against him. For my part in this, I still kept to my goal of straightening out some of this mess. I would ask my cutters to do their job and get on a weekly schedule of looking for product going out of date and mark it down a few days in advance. I eventually found out that had told them they didn't have to listen to me because I was just an assistant manager. I began scanning out waste like we were supposed to, but I would come in from my off days and fin a shopping cart of waste rolled back into the cooler, which would separate into the prepackaged items that he would just toss, and meat we cut there, which he would keep in the cooler. Seafood was a whole other problem. We would get cases of fish in, unwrapped, and the case of unwrapped fresh fish would usually have the sell-by date on it. They would never keep this information, like other stores, and would just throw the dates away and put those fish in the case until they were disintegrating. On days I had to set up the case, I would do it properly. If it looked bad, I would print up a ticket, scan it out, and throw it away. I told that the fish wasn't selling well and that we should back off certain varieties and fill the case out with kale, like other low-volume fish sections I had worked at. Nope. Well, one month, we apparently had a bad inventory. Me and the other assistant was called up to the store manager's office where he asked us what was going on back there. So I gave him my perspective. I said that many of the guidelines were not being followed, we were over-ordering product, and we weren't throwing it away when we should. The store manager didn't seem to care. He told us that he was gonna blow the market up and didn't care where we landed, whatever that means. But I left with the distinct impression that he wanted us to quit trying to fix shit and just keep the numbers where DS and had them. I reached out to former coworkers at the other stores and told them what was going on, and they said they had heard those rumors about this market for years. My cutters at this market were aware of it, and most of them go to the point where they wanted to fix things too, except for one of them. So I kept trying to fix things. I would have quit, but this company paid more than I would have gotten at any other market, and I really couldn't afford to take a pay cut at that moment. However, my wife was floating the idea that I should become a stay-at-home dad once her daughter was born, and just leave the place behind. But I didn't want to be a stay-at-home dad. For several weeks, our store manager would call us up to his office separately and yelled at us or tried to intimidate us. I told him, "You know, I've been here for over a year and never got the raise I was promised. You guys have never completed my training and want me to do things that I consider unethical. Just transfer me back to my old store and I'll step down." He replied that there were only 2 ways I could leave and that a transfer wasn't it. I took that as my options were to quit or get fired. I even contacted HR and asked to be moved, but they talked to the store manager and they denied me. We even showed the HR manager cases of out-of-date meat that had been frozen and put in the freezer in order to keep scanning it on our monthly inventories. Fortunately, I had been recording every yelling session that he had me present for. It's not something I would have normally done, but an old boss told me to document everything and cover my ass, so I did. I recorded video showing piles of out-of-date meat, video of fish disintegrating in my hands. I recorded audio of every time I brought the conditions up to my boss, his boss, and the store manager's assistants. It all amounted to a few hours of them being completely aware of what was going on and either threatening my job or telling me to leave it as it is. Over Christmas that year, I had 2 days off and talked with my wife again about the option of being a stay-at-home dad. I told her I would only do it if I could use the time in order to go back to school. We agreed on that, and I contacted the local news investigative team, and I turned over all the video and recordings, pictures, etc. that I had. I also had them talk with AM, who backed up everything and who also had his own examples. They talked to meat cutters at the other stores I had worked at to hear their rumors about this place, and they did a background check on me. They began sending in undercover shoppers who would show up when I wasn't there and buy spoiled fish and meat. I also covertly marked some meat that had been vacuum sealed and relabeled by our manager for months on end, which the news ended up buying. They sent all of this product out to be tested at a local university, and most, if not all of it, had 1,000 times the safe level of staph, E. coli, and something else that I can't remember right now. And I went in for 2 on-camera interviews as they wanted a face to put with the investigation. The investigation took around 3 or 4 months, and during that time we found out that our company was being bought by one of the biggest supermarket chains in the area. Oh well, the trigger had already been pulled. In April, the news aired a 3-day multi-part expose. The store had been suspicious for a few weeks because the news van had been outside shooting B-roll, and the reporter had contacted corporate for comments on the story. I walked into work after the first day, and it was the weirdest thing in the world. Some people wouldn't speak to me. Others came up to me when no one was around and thanked me. Some people wondered why I would continue to show up, and I did it because of 3 reasons. I have huge balls, I was in the right, and I wanted the severance package they were offering employees once all the stores closed due to the buyout. I had to work till the middle of June, as that was the date all the stores would close and start converting over. The company had told the news I was making it all up. Of course, they had no idea the extensive amount of evidence I had gathered. I had a lawyer offer to represent me pro bono, and besides being a nice guy, he was also 3/4 pitbull. He threatened to sue them for defamation, and they had to retract their statement and say that this was a one-time occurrence that they were not aware of. I received 2 death threats from people who were associated with MM. The police took care of them. They moved me back to store B, where I was able to work a bit easier. Then they had me spend a full day locked in a room with the district manager and a loss prevention officer who, I don't know, he questioned my story, but my story has never changed. And the next day they told me I didn't have to come in anymore, and I would keep all of my pay until the official closing date, keep my benefits package and severance package. My department manager, MM, was demoted to assistant, and from what I had heard, he moved to another state working for the same company. In fact, he moved to the same area his old boss, DS, was running. The store manager resigned before the stores shut down. In fact, his store closed before all of the other ones because they had a double your money back, no questions asked guarantee on meat sales. And people were bringing back whole tenderloins they had in their freezers. They lost a lot of money and decided to close that location down early. The store manager was rehired as the department manager when that location opened back up under the new company, and most of the employees remained unaffected, other than the buyout required everyone to reapply for their old jobs, and everyone got a massive pay cut across the board, though that had nothing to do with me. As for me, I am on my 4th year as a stay-at-home dad. I graduate from university with a degree in IT this May. I have a 4.0 and will be going into a master's program next year, which will be the last year before my girl starts kindergarten. I never wanted to get anyone fired. I just wanted to do a good job, not be forced to do things I didn't consider right. But I stand up to bullies. I don't let people threaten me, my family, our well-being, or anyone else I care about. I have been hesitant to write about this experience because it's in the past and I came out on top of everything, in a way that makes me feel as if the other shoe never dropped. Over the past several years, I think of this often, and it was one of the hardest things I ever had to do. I hope that putting it down on paper helps me finally quit thinking about it. I wonder sometimes if I did the right thing, that maybe I should have let it go. But it is what it is, and now you know. Alright everybody, that's it for today's video. I hope that you liked it. Unfortunately, the OP took down their post after I had already recorded it. That's why there was no text for the last story. But I thought it was such a good story anyways, so I hope that you liked it. If you noticed, this week's question of the day was not at the beginning of the video, and that's because a lot of people just want to get straight to the stories. So if people don't care for the question of the day or anything like that, then they can just watch the video and then kind of get out of it right here. But then for everyone else who likes them, you guys can stick around to the end of the video. I hope that that's okay. Alright, so last video's question of the day was if you see any faces or characters that look like other things in like cars or houses or everyday objects. And I had a lot of people tell me that it is a phenomenon called pareidolia, so I feel a lot better. Thank you. And today's question of the day is, what is your biggest pet peeve? I'm gonna tell you what mine is next video. And I know that a lot of yours was long intros, so this one's for you guys. Alright, so I'm sorry about my lack of posts for the last week. It has been crazy. I got a new microphone. I hope that I'm using it correctly because it's supposed to be a lot better than my previous one. So let me know what you think. And I promise you the videos are going to be coming every day, every other day like they were. So if you liked today's video, I would love for you to subscribe and hit that notification bell. You can follow me on Twitter too. I post every time I upload a new video there. And I will see you in my next video. Bye!